Good morning, campers, and welcome to Radio Camp Half-Blood, a Percy Jackson read-along podcast. I'm B.
And I'm Zack.
And this week we read Percy Jackson, The Titan's Curse, Chapter 3, Bianca D'Angelo Makes a Choice.
Oh yeah, and she certainly, I guess, makes a choice. It wasn't really a good choice, but you know what? It's a choice nonetheless.
I mean, a bad choice is still a choice, as I think all of us have learned that one way or another.
I suppose. I mean, like, you have to either choose or choose wisely. I don't think Bianca D'Angelo chose wisely.
Yeah, it felt a little impulsive. Well, I guess we're going to get to it because it sort of happens at the end of this chapter, but I feel a little dumb almost because the name of the chapter is Bianca D'Angelo Makes a Choice, but for some reason I thought she wasn't going to decide yet. I don't know, it shocked me that she was so quick to, make a decision.
Well, aren't most teenagers like that? It's like, I've made up my mind. I'm only 14, but I know the world.
I guess that's true. Yeah, she's like, this is me now, Mom. I'm a hunter of Artemis. I'm immortal and I have a bow and it's very cool.
Oh God, you're gonna give me a stomach ulcer. But for all the folks back home, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. And a Happy New Year. This is coming out New Year's Eve, right?
Yes, and by the time of the end of this recording, it will be New Year's Day, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
So guess what I can say, B? We're living in the past.
We're living in the past. This is last year.
But yeah, so what did you think of this chapter, B?
I like that we learn a lot of new, interesting stuff about the Hunters of Artemis and, the interesting, weird thing about how she's, a child for some reason. And yeah, a lot happens. I'm glad that the D'Angelos find out about the whole half-blood thing, though it happens in maybe not the most ideal way. It's very you're a wizard, Harry. Very all of a sudden in this very dramatic way. Annabeth just fell off a cliff. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird timing. I feel kind of bad for them in a way because a lot of dramatic stuff just went down and then they're like, okay, wait a second. What's happening here? I feel bad for Bianca's brother because he's kind of caught in the middle of all of this with the whole Hunters of Artemis thing. And he just, is really stoked to be a part of his Dungeons and Dragons. Wait, what is the made-up thing again? Mytho-magic or something? Is, their fake version of that?
It's mytho-magic. It's not D&D, it's a card game. It's pretty much like Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah, so it's more like Magic the Gathering.
Except, for some reason, it has, piercing damage, and I feel like Rick Riordan doesn't know anything about D&D, and he just assumed all card game systems are like D&D.
Yeah, Nico is a bit of a pain in the butt as a character. He's a little bit annoying. He's it's funny in a way because we're so used to seeing characters who don't know they're half-bloods who are just sort of amazed by the whole demigod thing, and I guess that's sort of Bianca, where she's just what are you talking about? But I love how Nico, because he's so entrenched in all this mythology stuff, is oh yeah, how many hit points does Zeus have and all of this stuff, which is pretty funny.
Well, I mean, that makes so much sense to a person that digests magic and fantasy and stuff. If I was thrown into a world that was just oh, there's dragons and wizards and elves, I'd be oh my God, that is so cool. And then they're what magical land am I in? And I would be it's Westeros. And I'm I'm out of here. Bye, everybody. Don't want to die.
See ya. I'm leaving immediately right now. Have we talked about this before? What fantasy, world would we want to live in? Because I feel almost none of them I would want to live in.
That's not true. For me, I can name a couple, but as long as it's not Westeros, where my likelihood of me living is, low, and then the idea of me getting, dysentery is quite high.
Oh, you're, definitely, a tertiary character who would be killed in the drop of a hat. You're just, the friendly librarian who's just hello, friends, and then, gets murdered by, a White Walker on episode 3. That's immediately what would happen.
Oh, no. Knowing my luck, what would end up happening is I would end up in the Night Watch, and then I would freeze to death.
That, too. Yeah, that's sort of what happened when you visited New York.
Oh, no. For me, I was just wow, you have White Walkers here? And it's no, that's a homeless man. Wow, he certainly does look magical.
It's Zach, please, come back. Yeah, I think we talked about this. I mean, even when we first started reading this series, I would never probably want to be a part of any of this. I wouldn't really want to go to Hogwarts. I wouldn't want to go to Narnia. I wouldn't want to go to Middle-earth. None of those places sound super appealing to me. Except maybe the Shire. I would like the Shire, but with all, like, the drama surrounding, like, the Lord of the Rings and the, like, Hobbit, all of that stuff, I could do without, like, the spooky, like, the ring wraiths and the... I don't want any of that. I just want, like, a nice Hobbit hole with some tea and some biscuits. That sounds pretty legit.
So for me, when it comes to it, you have to think about, like, all the times you're reading these books, like, cool, awesome things happen to the heroes. You could go into, like, a time period where, like, none of this is happening. It's just, like, a lull period. Like, as long as you're not in Hogwarts during the 90s, you're okay. Like, you could go over in the 80s or the 70s. I mean, there's going to be, like, popped collars and, like, people are listening to, like, the Bee Gees.
Pop collars with their, like, Hufflepuff ties askew. Oh, no, it's Hufflepuff piano ties.
No, it's Hufflepuff piano ties and then Hufflepuff colored bell-bottom jeans.
Oh, well, that's more the 70s. That's... None of those are good looks.
No, I'm just about to throw up because I just thought about, like, Dumbledore, like, how, like, in Fantastic Beasts, like, he wears, like, a suit and stuff. Like, I'm imagining him wearing, like, a disco, like, suit, like a...
With, like, a weird sort of teased out fro situation going on. Oh, it's not
and, like,
good...
he's just, like, wearing, like, a really gross, like, medallion in his shirts. Oh, God, I don't even want to think about Jude Law that way ever again.
And the medallion is one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, and you must break it by doing a dance-off.
Isn't that right? Defense against the dark arts teacher, John Travolta.
He does have a bit of a Voldemort kind of look to him, doesn't he? Bit of an uncanny face going on.
Hey, you've watched Saturday Night Fever. I've had to watch Staying Alive, and that's a worse movie.
Wait, what's Staying Alive? Is that like the sequel?
Yeah, no, there's a sequel to Saturday Night Fever, and that was to sell more records. It's terrible. It's all about, like, a theater dance, and I think the person that directed it was Sylvester Stallone, and his brother did all the music.
This is a lot of information to process. You just kind of hold all this stuff in your brain.
It's a movie. But, like, when it comes to, like, fantasy worlds, like, going back on track a little bit, there are some that I wouldn't mind being into. Like, a lot of them are like, oh, I'd like to be in some of Brandon Sanderson's works, like Mistborn, but, like, second era.
Well, I'm not really familiar with that, so I couldn't speak to those worlds.
Pretty much people ingest metals and they get superpowers.
Oh, right. Yes, I think you've mentioned this before. I mean, that's pretty cool. That's like a pretty sick arrangement.
Well, it has to be the second era because, like, the first era is just an apocalypse.
Yeah, apocalypse. Again, see, that's the thing is, like, any universe that has magic, there's usually also magical villains and other things that challenge you in some way. And, like, I would like the magic part. Like, the extent of magic that I want is, like, Matilda, where just, like, if someone's a jerk to me, I could throw a book at their head with my mind, but other than that, there's no other, like, sort of extra reality stuff going on. There's no paranormal goings-on other than my weird telekinesis that happens when I'm frustrated sometimes.
Like, when people say, like, I really want to be in a world, like, yeah, I think it'd be kind of cool to be in, like, Timorant and, like, the King Killer Chronicles, but it would be terrible because, like, it's just, like, magic, but not really, if that makes any sense. And then there's, like, Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson, and how pretty much every week there's a hurricane-level wind, and, like, just a hurricane just comes through the land and everyone's terrible. It doesn't quite work. Like, at least with, like, Camp Half-Blood, as we see here, it's almost like a joke. It's like, oh, no, guys, Annabeth's dead. But to, like, Nico and Bianca, like, oh yeah, this normally doesn't happen. Like, this is, like, a really rare thing that happened, that my best friend, you know, fell off a cliff and died.
Yeah, this is sort of a very dramatic scenario where they immediately see literally the pitfalls of being a demigod, where they're like, yeah, well, you can get murdered sometimes.
Oh, no, B. This is what rarely happens. Like, my friend fell off a cliff. It doesn't really happen all that much, but I guess it kind of does.
But this time it did happen. Like, it's a bad elevator pitch, really, for being a demigod. We're like, you could be like us and join us and fight monsters, and maybe your best friend will die or go missing, and it'll be very stressful. I mean, I guess they have no choice, because if you're a demigod, you're a demigod, and monsters will find you regardless, as we find out in this chapter, that they've had their fair share of run-ins. So really, it's the choice lies in how you learn about being a demigod and, like, teach yourself to defend yourself.
But when it comes to like this chapter, what I really enjoyed about it is kind of like the overarching arc of just making a decision with both Percy has to make a decision, good old Grover has to make a decision, kinda. Nico does, and then Bianca.
Well, wait, what's Grover's decision that he has to make?
He has to hang out with Nico and kind of explain all this stuff.
Oh, I get. Well, he like is stoked to hang out with Nico, right? Because they're both dweebs. So he's like, yeah, I get to hang out with this guy and talk about hit points and like saving throws.
I know that my best friend was like nearly murdered by a manticore, but like this is so much fun.
But like, let's talk about Magic the Gathering or whatever.
Yeah. And then we have, Bianca makes the biggest decision, and then we get Artemis, Zoe, and Thalia making like smaller decisions, more of like judgment calls than anything else.
Well, I guess they're just trying to persuade her to join their little spooky club situation. And then obviously, yeah, Percy's like there sort of vying for her to instead go to Camp Half-Blood, which is an interesting tension. I found this chapter just a little weird because it introduces this tension and then right away there's a decision made, which I mean, again, I shouldn't have been surprised because that's the name of the chapter, but it did strike me as like really sudden because we're only just now really learning about like Artemis and how she functions, and like there might be some history with Zoe and Talia that we don't fully understand. And then like before you know it, Bianca's already like, yes, I pledge myself to Artemis, like right away. And it struck me as a little bit like jumping the gun. I don't know. I could imagine like another chapter or two of her like languishing and trying to decide, like weighing the options and things like that. But I guess, I don't know, some kids just make snap decisions like that.
Kids do make snap decisions like that, but also this is not that long of a book, so the decisions have to be done really quickly. This isn't necessarily like a slow burn of a book, really. Is you have to either make that decision or you have to
It is done in a chapter, though. I feel like I may have preferred if they introduced this dilemma in one chapter and then maybe gave us a little bit more time to like sit with it, like the weight of this decision, because it almost like felt like it didn't mean as much because she decides so quickly, like, oh, well, is she going to change her mind? In which case, can she drop her I mean, I guess she does, right? That's like or I guess she can because Artemis explains that.
Well, yeah, they have the built-in loophole, like, oh, if you fall in love with a man or you decide you want to leave, you can do all that stuff.
But then you lose your immortality. So, like, I guess that's like a pretty easy decision when you think about it, because you just get exactly everything that you ever had back if you decide to not do it anymore.
Okay, so here's the problem with, like, immortality. Like, you could say that you want it, and then it's like 300 years later in the future, it's like, I don't want it anymore. I'm going to fall in love with this robot, beautiful man.
This beautiful robot man. That's a fanfic waiting to happen, is Bianca and her beautiful robot husband 200 years later. She's like, I'm tired. This is my android husband.
It's like the equivalent of like stopping a car and kicking someone out of the car in the middle of nowhere. Like after like a couple hundred years, everyone that you love is dead. And it's like the idea of it's like immortality is both a blessing and a curse, because it's just you're so out of the elements. Like, what's the internet? Like, what are all these things? Well, last time I was like immortal, I was like hanging out in like the library in Alexandria.
Yeah, I think like your concept of time would probably be really messed up and odd, and also like their like whole reality is different too. Like they're not just immortal; they live this like strange nomadic lifestyle where they're always camping around and like hunting, and they're not like really a part of any society. And
oh, so you mean the Boy Scouts of America?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it'd just be like this strange nomadic existence that you're also signing up for. It's not just like, you know, this immortality thing. You have to hunt with Artemis for feasibly forever.
Is it no different than like the Native Americans like on the plains and living a nomadic lifestyle?
I mean, I guess it's no different than that, but yeah, it's interesting to just think in terms of like this is, I mean, like modern fantasy sort of, and so you think about how like a teenager like Bianca, she obviously, I mean, she was an orphan, so there's a whole complicated thing, and she went to a military school, so it's not like she has really a normal life, but she did grow up in like a modern era, and then to be like, I'm gonna give that up to live this like very strange, like I guess uncommon way of life where you don't ever really have a home, and your family becomes this random group of people, and then even she she longs for this family to the point where I think that's kind of the tipping point of why she makes that decision. And I felt like that was like very selfish and weird considering she literally does have family who is alive, which is Nico.
I can name like on my hand 5 people that I hate in fictional worlds because I don't hate anyone in real life. She is on that list on my hand.
Bianca is?
So the one problem I had with this chapter, which, we're going to talk about it, is that the problem with Bianca is she's really selfish.
She's so selfish. And it's weird. It's weird how selfish she is. Like, she doesn't even think about it almost. She literally hems and haws for minutes, maybe, and then is like, yeah, I'm signing away my whole life. Goodbye, brother who I love so much, who is literally an orphan like me and doesn't have any other family or people who understand him. And I'm just gonna leave him with this group of strangers at this Camp Half-Blood and hope he, like, fends for himself because I'll be free of responsibility and have this culty family of my own. Like, it's kind of bonkers how quickly she just, like, goes with that.
Yeah, and it's like one of those things. What's going to happen is she's either going to have a redemption where she's like, you know what, I made a bad decision, and the love of her brother is what breaks the oath, or something like that. Or it's going to be like she's going to live the rest of her life as a terrible person, and you're going to learn no morals whatsoever. Well, especially like with like Nika when he finds out that her sister is totally like flew the coop and doesn't love him. Like, that's a terrible thing. That's like the equivalent of like, okay, let's put this in perspective. If Violet did that, like she joined the Hunters of Artemis and she's like, you know what, Klaus and Sunny, F you guys.
Yeah, peace out, Klaus. Well, I mean, that's even worse because there's also an infant child thrown in the mix. So it's like, all right, well, you get to take care of Sunny and I'm gonna go.
Well, don't forget, Sunny's also a girl, so she would also come around, so it would just be...
So just be Klaus by himself. Aw, that's really sad to think about. Him just, like, alone in a library crying, like, with none of his family.
See, that's the problem I have when you have characters that do stuff like this impulsively. Like, they don't even think about the consequences until, well, it's too late. And then you have to also think about, like, Nico. It's like, how is he going to be as a person?
She doesn't consult him at all. Like, I ask my sister all the time to help me with big life decisions. So the idea that he's like the one person in her world, right? Like, she's an orphan, she's at a military school, this is the only connection she has to her family is this brother, and she doesn't even ask him about it.
No, and it's what pisses me off is when you have a character that acts so recklessly. Like, obviously, like, this is like almost like hitting you over the face with it. Like, she has to have a character arc where she becomes a less terrible person.
But so they really established that right away about how selfish she is. Yeah, I wasn't, I guess, expecting her to be so firmly selfish and, like, short-sighted. I don't know. I guess we didn't get a lot of characterization of her until just now because we were mostly trying to, like, find them and save them from Vice Principal Thorne and all of that. So there was so much distracting stuff that we didn't actually get to see what kinds of people they were that much.
Okay, if I'm going to try to like play some type of like devil's advocate on this and why Bianca is not a bad person.
Okay, I'm all ears.
What she did was she witnessed, Annabeth jump off the cliff with the Manicore.
That's true.
And she like sees this and is like, oh my God, I could die like super easily. Like, I couldn't protect my brother. I couldn't do all this stuff. So I want to become a strong female because she's almost like, what's the best way to put this? Like, she's at a vulnerable state where anything like, oh, we could make you immortal. We could teach you how to fight.
That's true. They did just go through a whole trauma vignette just moments ago. So I think maybe she's in shock to some extent. Like, literally, she witnesses someone maybe fall to their death off of a cliff. She finds out that her vice principal is a manticore, that the gods and the, like, monsters of Greek mythology are real, that she and her brother are demigods, and that she may, if she wants, become a hunter of Artemis. Like, these are a lot of heavy things to learn in, like, the past 20 minutes or whatever.
Like, normally what should happen is, maybe I should sleep on this before I make this big life-threatening decision.
I take longer to decide what kind of sandwich I want. I've truly taken longer.
Oh my God, like, I really want to get a PBJ, or do I want a chicken sandwich? You know what? I'm going to just join this cult and live the rest of my life as an immortal being.
I'm just going to join this cult.
Other one, Camp Half-Blood, I don't get to live forever. I don't get to hang out with all these girls.
Do I want fries or a hash brown, or do I want to abandon my brother with strangers? I mean, I don't know. We haven't really seen a lot of her character, but not a great start. Not like a really good first impression that she made. If this is like one of the first like big character things that we witness is her kind of selling out her brother just a little bit. I mean, he's not going to die or anything. I mean, he could die, technically, because he's not immortal.
Okay, now here's the terrible scenario that's in my head. Just imagine like she changes her mind. Like, I gotta go to Nico. Oh, Nico's in the hospital and he's just about to die of old age.
That's such a sad idea, right? And then she's just there and she still looks the same. That's like, I want to find the passage where Percy's like making fun of this concept a little bit because I totally agree with everything.
Yeah, and you know what? Percy's right. And like Thalia's a little right too. It's like, this is kind of a silly thing. Like, okay, I'm not to say that there aren't any like impressionable girls that would not want to obviously take this because immortality is something that's like super tempting.
Yes,
like,
immortality is kind of a big offer. But this is what Percy says. I tried to imagine what she was saying, being immortal, hanging out with only middle school girls forever. I couldn't get my mind around it.
Okay, B, I don't know about you, but like for me, like I've like lived in the theater most of my life and I've lived in close proximity to people. After like a couple weeks of just seeing nothing but them, you kind of like go insane a little bit. Now just imagine that, but like forever.
Yeah, I feel like I would go nuts. There's so many reasons why this doesn't sound ideal. It's like, she barely knows these people. She doesn't know if they're annoying. She doesn't know what the situation's going to be like, what kind of spooky, culty stuff that she's going to have to do. There's like weird animal pelts mounted everywhere. There's just like a lot of stuff to process.
But B, Thy has to make a decision. Like, oh no.
If she was an only child, I actually would feel okay with this decision because it would be pretty justified. But because there's like another person in the mix who she's related to, and it's like the one I don't know.
But also, she's not an orphan. She technically has a parent of some sort. She's got a godparent.
Oh, that's true. She has a godparent, right? And then I guess her mortal parent is dead. That's like what they said. Or like, I don't know, maybe they don't know that their mortal parent's alive. But for all they know, they're orphans.
Yes, and they're being actually hunted by a mysterious count. And then when Bianca turns 18, she gets to inherit the gigantic fortune because their mansion mysteriously burned down.
See, at the very least, they have the money, right? Their parents really thought some stuff out. Like, they have an account that they can access as children and go to school instead of the Baudelaires, who apparently are millionaires, and they're just sort of roving about town, going from guardian to guardian, being chased by a murderer. Good plan there, Baudelaires. You should have gotten life insurance or something.
Oh, they did. It's like Harry Potter, like when he opens up his vault. B, that money isn't they saved for Harry Potter. That money was their life insurance.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Actually, not really. I guess that was their fortune. There's an expanded universe story, I guess, that Harry's secretly a billionaire because his great-grandfather, like, invented, like, a wart cream. But, like, I want to say, like, that's their life insurance policy, was when Harry opens up the vault and there's just oodles of gold.
All I'm saying is, at least whoever their parents are really thought that stuff through.
Like, it's not like it's not happened before, B, with, like, Bianca and Nico. Like, they've noticed, like, weird, freaky things happening before with, like, a bus driver with horns. And they've seen all, like, this crazy, creepy things.
Right, that's true. It's all starting to sort of make sense. Which, again, we've, like, talked about this in, like, magical children media is, like, a really popular idea, right? You think about, like, I was thinking about Halloween Town, how, like, Sophie like moves the cookie with her mind and then her mom stops it like to hide from her that she's a witch. Like there's all these like little signs. I think this happens a lot with like witches and wizards and stuff. Like obviously the Harry Potter thing of like, oh, he like disappears the glass at the zoo. Like these like weird subtle things. Well, maybe not subtle, but just sort of like strange things that happen that they can't really explain without the context of knowing who they are.
So, like, when you have, like, a story with, like, a person that has magical abilities, it's much easier to have, like, the beginning of the book to be like, oh, the unexplainable, and then once they establish, oh, you're a wizard, Harry, and then everything starts to click in place. Like in, I think it's chapter 2 of Harry Potter, where they're talking about how there's weird magical things happen to Harry, such as his aunt gave him an ugly haircut, and the next day he woke up before it was cut, as well as, like, this ugly sweater, like, it kept getting so small it became, like, a hand puppet. And then when he finds out that he's a wizard, like it makes all sense. Like it's not just, oh, you have magical powers. Let's explain it this way. You can do it through subtlety rather than just doing it all at once.
Yeah, I mean, I like that because obviously there needs to be like foreshadowing. This is a little bit different than say something like Harry Potter where you're seeing some of that foreshadowing in the text. They just sort of talk about it like, oh right, there was that guy with the horns who whatever.
Well,
Like,
there's also like the examples of like looking at Percy Jackson, like in the first chapter, he's talking about like the snake that fell into his crib, and then there's like the Cyclops in like the gigantic like trench coat, like walking at him, and then you have the whole thing with like Mrs. Dodds in the first chapter. It's all perfect. Like that's perfect for like foreshadowing and build up to the payoff of him being a half blood.
the quote from Bianca is that explains Nico, you remember last summer those guys who tried to attack us in the alley in DC, and that bus driver, Nico said, the one with the ram's horns, I told you that was real. So yeah, there's like this like weird magic realism thing going on where they have all this stuff happen and they don't really have any way to explain it. So in some ways they just justify it away. Like, oh, that didn't really happen. I just was seeing things or something. But
Well, you have to. Like, if you found out, like, B, you're a wizard. Like, B, you wouldn't believe that that was an actual thing unless someone actually showed you it or gave you examples.
I'd be like, oh, well, like all of this makes sense within context. Yeah.
Well, like, okay, we're going to keep going to Harry Potter, but the second Harry realizes that there's magic is when Hagrid makes the pigtail on Dudley.
Yeah. Because, well, he physically sees it with his own eyes, like from someone else.
Yeah, which happens here. Both Bianca and Nico physically see the Manicore. Yeah, and they believe now.
Yeah, exactly. So that's like a big, rushing into it, so to speak. Like it's not even like a subtle thing. They don't even find out about the demigod thing until after they see a big fight with a manticore who they thought was their vice principal, and then they both fall off a freaking cliff together. So like that's a very dramatic way to discover that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where it's helpful to have, but also again, Bianca should have like waited and like thought about like her pros and cons. You know what? Here's an advice to everybody. If you have a big decision, get a pad of paper. Okay, once you guys get a pad of paper, now you make 2 columns, pros and cons. Make sure to put a line down the middle, and then you write the pros and the cons, like your big decision. And then once you do it and you think about it in maybe like a couple days, then you do that big decision. Like, when it comes to this chapter, like, again, not a lot happens, but a lot does happen. More of, like, I could break it down in one breath. Percy's distraught because of Annabeth. They don't know actually what's happened to Annabeth. Apparently, she's just vanished. She's not, maybe she's dead, maybe she's not. She's just vanished.
That's true, because that's what Artemis says, right? She says that she senses there's some magic at hand where she was disappeared somehow. So I guess maybe something happened with the vice principal where he like disappeared himself and also her, or like I don't even know what happened really. Like, did he fall into the ocean?
No, but my favorite line is actually from Nico in this chapter where he's talking to Percy about all the things that he's so excited about. So pretty much what happens is like Nico's talking to Percy, and I guess Nico's like really getting under Percy's skin. And one of the things he says is not really a nice thing, but it's almost like, if Nico can come to this conclusion, Percy should have came to this conclusion.
Yeah.
If Annabeth's mother was Athena, the goddess of wisdom, then why didn't Annabeth know better than to fall off a cliff? I tried not to strangle Nico for asking that one.
Yeah, he's like almost like an annoying brother archetype, I guess, because he's asking all sorts of stuff, like this whole passage. Did I fight a lot with Talia since she was daughter of Zeus? I didn't answer that one. If Annabeth's mother was Athena, the goddess of wisdom, then why didn't Annabeth know better than to fall off a cliff? I tried not to strangle Nico for asking that one. Was Annabeth my girlfriend? At this point, I was ready to stick the kid in a meat-flavored sack and throw him to the wolves.
Like, okay, like you can have like the annoying brother archetype, but here it makes sense because he's like being exposed to this world, so of course he's gonna be kind of annoying because he doesn't know what's going on.
Right, and he's already a nerd about this stuff.
Yeah, he's already a nerd about all this stuff. So it's like, obviously, like if it was you or me in the situation, we would ask so many questions. Like for you, you'd be like, so like, is there like a lot of like death and danger? Like you'd just be asking all the things.
Yeah, I'd be like, can I not? Is there a way to not? And then like right after all of that, then Percy says, I figured any second he was going to ask me how many hit points I had and I'd lose my cool completely. Like clearly he's like looking at this from like a, oh wow, magic exists perspective. Like he's very excited. I think maybe when you think about it in that context, that Bianca looks at all of this in like more pragmatic sense, like, oh, we could die very easily. Maybe that's why she makes that decision so quickly. Also, seeing how annoying he is might justify why Bianca doesn't want to hang out with him.
That's even worse though, because like when you're a kid, like Nico, like have you ever like talked to like a little kid? Like sometimes they can be like really like pragmatic, and no offense to our younger listeners, but some of them like I've talked to, like working at Disneyland, kids have asked me questions like, what's my third favorite dinosaur?
I mean, that's pretty cool. I'd love to talk about that.
Like for me, it's Gallimimus.
I don't know if I have a third favorite dinosaur. Triceratops, I guess.
There's nothing wrong with that, but also you have to consider that Nico obviously would grow out of that once he gets established. But Bianca's like, you know what? This is a good time to like ditch my brother.
Yeah,
it's like
just at the most annoying point in his development, I'm like, oh, well, you're kind of bothering me. I mean, this is actually a very common trope, I think, in like fantasy, where like people make snap decisions based on like sort of like immature, childish emotions about like interpersonal relationships. Like I think about like Labyrinth and how she wishes her baby brother away to a goblin king just because he's kind of annoying. He's like an infant and crying, and she gets annoyed enough to like wish him away.
Okay, to be fair, like in that situation, she was LARPing and it was raining and her parents were leaving her and she was annoying. But then she saw David Bowie and she's just like, David Bowie, yes. And then she saw the asset and she's just like, you know what? I need to like get my baby brother out of here because this is some like serious like pant bulge that I don't want to be a part of.
No, but like literally, do you think about Labyrinth for a second and how like she wishes away her brother, an infant baby. She wishes him away because he has her stuffed animal, and she gets like possessive, and she's like grown. She's a grown person who should not be that possessive of a stuffed animal. And clearly the baby didn't get it. Toby wasn't taking her stuff. Her parents gave this to her baby brother to like placate him, and it's fine because it's a baby. Like, what a weird thing to get angry about. I don't know. There's a long history of selfish people in fantasy is what I'm saying.
So the problem with Sarah in Labyrinth is she's automatically like a terrible person, and she doesn't change until she has her mental breakdown at the end of the movie when she's in her room and she's dancing with all her imaginary friends. Like when it comes to like fantasy tropes, like usually that's what happens is people make brash decisions based on immaturities. Like Labyrinth actually is a really good example. Even Lord of the Rings, when Frodo is being possessed by the ring and he's getting kind of like angry at Sam, and Sam kind of is like, bye, I'm leaving you. And he's like, you know, Schmeagol's going to take me. We're going to throw the ring off. But then in the end, Sam's like, you know what? Mr. Frodo's my friend. So he like helps him up the mountain and they throw the ring off.
I guess it makes sense, especially in something like YA, where we're dealing with like sort of younger emotions and things feel very fraught, I guess, when you're that age. I mean, I remember being in middle school and I feel like every interaction just felt like very, like it was going to be like that forever or something. But then obviously you know that like those circumstances change, but then in the context of something like a magical world, you have to make life-changing decisions at like the age of 12, which is kind of a lot to expect of people.
Well, not necessarily, because in different cultures, like being an adolescent comes at different ages. Like being a Jew, it's 13. You know, we have your bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. There's many different ones, like the Spartans. Like if you killed like a lion, you became a man.
Right. There's a lot of coming of age like ceremonies and things that exist in different cultures, and I understand that. But even so, like when you have a bar mitzvah, you read some Hebrew and you have a party with your family. You don't like swear your allegiance to some like roving gang of nomadic hunters where you'll never see your family again, or at least only sometimes see them. Like that's a bit different as far as decision making is concerned.
See, the thing with like YA is that when it comes to like us, because we're adults, we've already had our maturity. I would hope, even though, you know, we both have our moments, is that a lot of the times these kids are feeling these feelings for the very first time because, you know, their bodies are changing in weird ways. I'm not going to give you guys the talk because I'm 23 and like I'm not qualified to talk to you guys about your body.
You may have noticed that you have magical powers. Well, I mean, that's like such a thing too, right? We talked about like the 13th year, like way back when we were talking about the first book. And like that's just like that cheesy Disney Channel original movie where the kid turns into a mermaid. But even that's just like such a heavy handed metaphor for puberty, right? Like, oh, you're coming of age and you have fins.
Yeah, and also it's like one of those things of just having like emotions and just being like, I want to join the Hunters of Artemis so I can like stay young
Be
forever.
cool and live forever. Yeah.
Just imagine having that voice. So your voice just keeps cracking, but for the rest of the time itself.
Well, I hope you don't have that voice if you're a member of the Hunters of Artemis, because that would be. Pretty sure it's all girls.
It's either that or you have like the "Hey guys," I can't do a Grenda impression.
You sounded like Scooby-Doo.
Yoink, Scoob.
Yeah, you went from Scooby-Doo to Shaggy real quick.
You can either have like either or, but it's like until like the end of time, until the sun explodes.
Yeah. I'm really glad that my life really isn't based on any decisions I could have made at 12 or 13. Like, that would have been not good.
Like, I can barely make decisions now, and I'm 23.
It's true. I'm 25, and I don't trust myself to do anything.
But, like, as the story's going on, like, we haven't really talked about it, except that Bianca D'Angelo is kind of terrible in the situation.
She's kind of terrible. I mean, like, that's, like, the main plot point. There's some, like, character development stuff as far as, like, explanations of things.
So we learned some more sinister things, because the only reason Percy Jackson is allowed into the camp is because he needs to recall what has happened with the Manticore. And it's like, the last boy that came here was turned into a jackalope.
I really love that part, because she's like, oh, how I love turning people into jackalopes. Like, it's Artemis's, like, most treasured pastime is turning men into jackalope. I love the quote when he goes into the tent to talk to Artemis about everything, and it says, Zoe sat down and Artemis is right. She glared at me as if all the stuff Artemis had just said was my fault, like I'd invented the idea of being a guy.
Yeah. No, it's like the equivalent of like a straight guy trying to hit on like a bunch of lesbians at a lesbian bar.
I mean, I could kind of see that, yeah. Well, in some ways, because it's just like they're like not at all available. That's like the whole concept of them, is that they're just like, don't need no man, don't need no romantic relationship whatsoever.
But here it's like we learn some more sinister things. Like Artemis is like, have you felt it in the air? I feel a presence that I haven't felt in many years.
The stirring.
The stirring is coming. And it's like, I haven't felt these monsters. Some monsters I even almost forgot from memory. They have come back, and I have to get them, pray that they have not come back. And I love the idea of like, wait, do gods pray?
Yeah, he's sort of like, wait a second, aren't you a goddess? Or do you, whomst do you pray to? There's sort of like that moment. I do like that this is like the very typical like fantasy scene of just like, what I feared, the worst, it is coming true. Like that, I feel like that's such a thing in fantasy where like an all-knowing character is sort of like, ah, yes, it's the thing that is happening. I keep thinking of like Halloween Town, literally like Agatha Cromwell when, Debbie Reynolds' character is just sort of like, oh, yes, something is going on. I suspected as much whatever. Like, there's this, like, inkling of something happening, and she's like, of course, yes, the stirring of the monsters. You have confirmed my suspicions.
It's the equivalent of, like, when they're in the Mines of Moria in Lord of the Rings, and they confront the Balrog for the first time, and Gandalf is just like, this is a creature that is so pure evil. And it's just like, we have to run, everybody. And then they have the whole action scene, and it's just like, Jesus. Like, this is like an ancient evil before time itself, because the Balrog's a fallen angel.
It's sort of like these little hints that something worse is lurking, which this is kind of a lot to think about, right? I mean, we know that the stirring was kind of a thing based on the stuff that Dr. Thorne said in the last chapter.
Well, it's also the idea, it's like Kronos is coming back. That might be one of the things. It's just like, because he's coming back, more of the Titans or possibly older, eviler beings are coming back.
I mean, Titan's Curse is the name of the book, so there's some implication that something's going on. Then also you have to think about, like, there's the thing with Kronos and Luke still, like, happening somewhere with that spooky sarcophagus. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen with that. Like, there's definitely like a larger thread of like things coming into place. I mean, this is like definitely fantasy 101 stuff of like, oh, like here's this spooky thing happening and this spooky thing, and they all connect to the larger puzzle piece of a prophecy of so and so is going to have to make a decision. Like that totally like tracks with like the arc of the books. Like each book has like its own mini arc, and then it's probably all gonna connect into a larger picture at the end.
There's always like an A story and a B story. The A story is kind of like what I like to call like the whole adventure, whereas the B story is like the underlining like themes and kind of like, oh, there's more mystery to this than I thought.
And like why everything is happening, right? Because especially with something like fantasy and mythology, you know that there's like strings being pulled behind the scenes, so to speak. Like there's literal prophecies and things that have been predicted to happen. So it's not just like this one quest that they go on. There's all this other implications of like stuff that's going on.
So especially when it comes to Rick Riordan, you have to remember this very important fact about Rick Riordan. Before he wrote Percy Jackson, he was a mystery author.
Right.
And a lot of mysteries have that of like, they have like the one little thread, and that once that detective finds and starts pulling at it, this unravels the whole thing.
It's like, oh, it's bigger than I ever thought. It's connecting the like red string on the corkboard kind of situation.
So now we can look away. Look away. You never realize.
Oh my god. The new season comes out so soon. I can't believe it.
Hey, but you know it comes out the same day as this episode, so yeah.
Oh my god, you're right. If you guys are listening and not watching Unfortunate Events, I commend you.
Yeah, so don't message us until afterwards, so when we're crying, like, our podcast can be like our, like, what is it, like our trauma, like, support group?
Yep.
And then the show is over, and then B and I, we cried.
And we're just on an island staring wistfully and weeping.
As we drink our coconut, was it Cornell?
Cordial, yeah.
Even, actually, that brings up a good point. The Hunters of Artemis are a lot like in Series Unfortunate Events with the end, with the cult at the end, when they're just sipping their coconut drink and they're just content with their lives.
Oh, I mean, like, they're culty in many different ways. Like, they recall.
Think about it in this way, B. And I'm not going to tell you if it's Series Unfortunate Events or this cult.
This cult. Name that cult. Do.
But here we have the situation where all these people, they're all wearing the same pretty much identical clothing, silver parkas and blue jeans.
Right, I forgot about that. Uniforms. Uniforms really add to the culty factor 100%. Little matching outfits.
But then you also have the thing about here. I'm just going to keep giving examples until you tell me when this is not a cult. They have no technology whatsoever,
right,
other than the bare essentials of just, hey, we need all these things for like fires and all this stuff. Everything else is provided for them by Artemis. It's getting into like a more of a cult. They're forbidden from like contacting the outside world as long as it's another woman, not a man.
Yeah, they're also not allowed to love at all. Like they take like a pledge of not having any romantic love, which is like, again, like a definitely earmark of a cult thing where it's like you have to sever ties with other emotional relationships or whatever.
And then the most important thing about Artemis is she makes them pledge allegiance to her.
Yeah, the pledge allegiance thing is weird. I mean, like, I get she's a goddess, but spooky. I don't know. I don't feel great about it. Something about it makes me feel more creeped out that she looks like a child. I don't know. Maybe she'd be, like, less intimidating if she was a child, but something about, like, her pulling all the strings and, like, manipulating people into joining her, and she, like, looks like the people in her group because she wants them to feel comfortable, I guess. It's sort of like, what's the famous, like, example of, like, it's an alien, but they present as, like, someone's dad because they don't want to, like, upset people? It's kind of like that idea. Where it's like, I could be anything, but I'm going to present myself as the child.
It's like the idea again be of like Artemis could just turn into like a gigantic pillar of fire, or it's like even like in the Bible of like she could like turn into like her true form. Everyone turns into like pillars of salt.
Yeah, I have to like read this passage because it really speaks to the spookiness of Artemis. I could appear as a grown woman or a blazing fire or anything else I want, but this is what I prefer. This is the average age of my hunters, and all young maidens for whom I am patron, before they go astray. Go astray, I asked? Grow up, become smitten with boys, become silly, preoccupied, insecure, forget themselves. I'm reminded a lot of Narnia, actually. So I don't know how much of that series you read, but I only read like the first and the last one, which was weird, but I did it for my children's like class. And who's the oldest? I always forget. We literally mentioned this. So I think it's Susan who she gets like basically banished to hell because she gets more interested in boys and lipstick than like Narnia or something. That's basically the gist of it. It's like not. It's more complicated than that. I'm pretty sure, and people are probably gonna get angry at me for saying this because they're like, no, well, it's more about how she's like preoccupied with material things, whatever. But there's some like underlying weird misogyny there where it does feel very much like Artemis is like, we're not like other girls. We're not like preoccupied with our appearances and love and things like that. Especially like that example in Narnia where basically she gets like banished from being like a magical like Narnia royalty person because she cannot be in the kingdom of heaven with Aslan because she cares about lipstick and boys or whatever. Yeah, it doesn't often sit well with me when like they associate certain aspects of like femininity or like female sexuality with like growing up and therefore like losing a sense of magic in some way. Like you could either be immortal or you can like fall in love, and I think that that's like a bad ultimatum to give someone also.
I mean, the only perspective that I can give with this is just this, is that for a boy to become a man, and normally in a lot of mythology, I'm going to use mythology for this because that's normally what happens, is that he has to either prove himself or he has to do something that's like kind of like has to kick his father's ass almost to become the real man.
Right, to like overtake him. That's like very Freudian, that idea.
Pretty much. Like it's either that or you grow a beard. Once you grow a beard, you're a man. But like a lot of times with girls as well as a lot of the time in stories, a girl becomes a woman either after a traumatic event or like they do something that's so extraordinary that, you know, they're changed in such a way, or, you know, it's that time of the month.
Or like, but there's also like the weird implication too that like girls are of age when they are married or like find a man too. So like there's that weird aspect too of like their maturation is like tied to another person and like that kind of thing. Like growing up is made synonymous with having romantic love with a dude. I mean, do they specifically say a dude too? Because like also like that is some like very specific idea of like only straight people exist in this idea.
No, B, because you're picking into it more deeply than you think it is. I feel like I'm sure they all have like a lot of like.
Well, it just says romantic love, I guess. So it's just romantic love. It's not necessarily a dude, but there is like some underlying like patriarchal specific implications. Like you either stay a maiden forever or you become a woman and then you have a family and like all of that stuff and you fall in love.
How we're looking at this again is we're looking at this through a modern perspective, whereas you have to think about Artemis and her myth. Her myth is essential to why your hundreds of Artemis follow her rules, and we'll find out. That's not even like a spoiler. You'll find out like specifically why she has chosen this life, and she wants to choose her life for the hunters. It doesn't have to deal with anything. In her myth, she was quintessentially like screwed over by a dude, so that's like she's sworn off all men and all that stuff. It's a lot like Hera, and how Hera is Zeus's wife, but like she doesn't cheat. She's the goddess of marriage, pretty much.
Yeah, I'm sure I would have more context as to why Artemis is the way she is and like what rules exist, like if I were more familiar with the myth. But again, I don't really know anything about myths. I am often myth taken.
But it's like we could easily like talk about this, and it's like a weird like wishy-washy thing. It's like, oh, what if they're this or what if they're that? But I guess the main line is that when this is written, Artemis is pretty much like a role model. You don't have like examples of like strong female characters in ancient times. Like this was it. You didn't. I guess you could have like Medea. Like you have like plays in the Greek mythology. There's a lot of times is the women were more clever than the men, so they would always like outsmart them in some way or some form, and that was always like either the comedy or that was like the drama.
Yeah. I don't know. I have a lot of reservations about the whole Hunters of Artemis thing. I guess we'll see how that goes. I mean, I'm trying to think about like how Talia feels about this whole thing because she clearly has some animosity about Zoe, and she gets very angry at Percy about the whole thing of like going after Dr. Thorne without them. Again, there's a justification for that, but that's neither here nor there. And she kind of like pins all the stuff with Annabeth on him and like gets really mad about them getting involved. Like, oh, if you didn't follow him, then like we could have handled it ourselves without these guys getting involved. And she clearly has like established history stuff going on with Zoe that we don't know exactly what. And she gets very bitter. Like, no, you don't need to join them. You can come to Camp Half-Blood like what I did, like we do. And she has like this like very firm line in the sand drawn about not liking them for some reason.
And I believe I have a theory for this, even though
You've read it.
I've read this, but it's like the idea of like, so in the natural order of life, when a kid finds out he's a demigod, normally what happens is they go to Camp Half-Blood. Now, when Artemis comes in, she's disrupting the natural order of things.
Mm-hmm.
The gods specifically set up this camp to help their kids out. And here is Artemis that's kind of like, almost like Shanghaiing kids, almost. And she's like, I'm gonna save them. Like, by golly, it's almost like a religion. Like, I'm gonna convert them, and they're gonna love me, and that's me, rather than them just living their lives. What Camp Half-Blood does is, kids get to grow up, and they get to defend themselves, and they can live semi-normal lives. Whereas when you have Artemis, she's disrupting the natural order because all the women she's taking are pretty much, they have immortality, and it's not in existence.
So they're protected somehow, which is the main motivation, I think, of the impulsive decision that Bianca makes, is because she sees this whole dramatic thing happen with Annabeth, and she's like, oh, well, I guess if this is the way I can be safe, then I guess I gotta.
Yeah, no, it's a really unique situation. I mean, do I like the Hunters of Artemis? I mean, they're a bunch of like middle school girls, and it's just like one of those things I feel like.
Middle school girls were not my favorite when I was in middle school, to be honest.
Well, I'm not talking about like anything like, oh my god, I love them. But like, you have to think about it in the context of, do I like the Hunters of Artemis? They're cool in the extent of like chicks with crossbows and like bows and arrows. That's cool.
They're just a gaggle of Katnisses. A gaggle of Katnai.
Yeah, they're just a bunch of catnip. And like, oh god, it's all terrible. But at least with like Camp Half-Blood, you get to live and like be happy for a chance rather than just being in like this weird purgatory hell.
I have a sneaking suspicion that because this decision was made in such haste, and also because of other reasons, that it's not going to be final necessarily, that she might back out somehow. And there's like a lot of ways that could happen. She could change her mind. She could get interested in other things and think it's not for her. She could fall in love, whatever that could mean. So there's like a lot of examples of that.
See, this would actually make for like a really funny like romantic comedy in the 90s.
Yeah.
She's a hunter of Artemis. He's a man.
She's a hunter of Artemis. He works at the local bookstore. Their meet cute will make
No. It's like, she's a hunter of Artemis. He's a local Boy Scout who got lost in the woods.
Oh my god, yes.
It's like Moonrise Kingdom almost.
It is like Moonrise Kingdom, actually. That's really funny.
But yeah, you could easily like have like a rom-com like this. But you know what? Hollywood, get on it. I think it's time for a Hunters of Artemis rom-com.
I feel like we accidentally make everything into a rom-com. Somehow.
The part of Artemis will be played by Julia Andrews.
Julia Andrews at her age.
Yeah.
No, but they're middle schoolers, right? I can't think of a single actress who's middle school age. I thought of Dakota Fanning, and she's literally my age now, so, like, no.
You get 11 from Stranger Things. That's the only one I get that's coming to my brain.
Oh, right, yes, Millie Bobby Brown.
Yeah, because she already looks like a god. Like, she just has, like, that weird, like, angelic, like, look to her.
That's true, and, like, the very intense, spooky eyes. Yeah, I could see her as a Hunter of Artemis, for sure. Is she middle school age? I guess she is, yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you could make her middle school age. It's not that hard.
Yeah. That's really funny. That's literally the only character I could think of. But anyway.
Or you get like Ellen Page, who's always looked the same in like the last like 80 years.
Always look the same. Yeah, me and Ellen Page have the same disease called being very tiny and young looking. We're like of the same species of elf.
Yeah, but there's plenty that you could work with this. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of things coming up. I know it's going to happen, but it's almost more interesting to like talk about the what ifs.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything that big that happens in this chapter other than that. I guess there's like a few minor things.
There's more questions that are proposed, such as, Who are Nico and Bianca's parents? Is it a god or a goddess?
What exactly is the stirring? What's happening with that?
Or what is this creature that's going to be popping up, apparently, that they need to stop that will bring, like, the end of all the gods?
Yeah, there's also, like, this weird moment where Nico forgets the game he used to play before he played the mythology game, and then they seem to make, like, a big deal of that moment, so I feel like that's some sort of weird foreshadowing, but I can't quite place what that could mean right now. I'm not just being weird, right? Like, they make a big deal out of that, if I remember.
Let me just pull up a quote. 1 second. Oh, by the pricking of my thumb, something wicked this way comes. Yeah, maybe that might be something. Maybe it might not. It might just be that Nico is so happy that he's found this new game that he just forgot the other one. But there's a lot of questions, especially like, who is this general? Because it certainly isn't George Washington.
Oh yeah, that's true, the whole general thing. I forgot about that. I have no idea. Who could that even be?
So the chapter kind of ends with the idea that Artemis has to go hunting alone because it's almost like Predator. It's like, it's a one-on-one fight. I have to defeat this monster and then bring it back.
Yeah, I just got a bare-knuckle brawl with this monster in the parking lot of a Denny's. Let's go.
Yeah, and then she's just like, I have to, like, take this on mano y mano so I can bring it to the gods and show them that Kronos and the evil is back. Why can't you just say it rather than, demonstrate it? Like, you have all the proof you need with, Dr. Thorne, because a manticore has not been seen in millennia. But I'm no expert. So she has commanded all the hunters of Artemis to go to Camp Half-Blood, even though the last time they were there didn't really...
Bad things happened. They're like, oh, they reconstructed the cabins you burned down, I think she says.
Yeah, they burned down. It's like, oh, I like to, like, when they have things like that, I'd love to see, like, flashback chapters of just, like, a bunch of kids, like, running around in panic as the camp's on fire.
There's, like, screaming chaos. There's, like, that one guy from SpongeBob, my leg!
And then there's the part where Dionysus is, like, playing Pinochle, drinking his Diet Coke, and the whole place is on fire. It's like, this is fine.
Yep, this is fine.
This is fine.
That is him. That's, like, his approach to managing that camp. He's just sort of like, well, I guess this is okay. Literally, Tantalus was there for an entire summer, and he's like, well, he's a cannibal and everything's a nightmare, but I'm lazy.
I kind of really enjoy Dionysus.
He's truly just chaotically... Or is he chaotic neutral? No, he's just sort of, like, true neutral. Like, he just doesn't care about anything.
Well, he's true neutral. Like, he doesn't care. He doesn't need to care, almost.
He has no stake in anything.
Because he's just punished. He's, like, working, like, a government job. Like, yeah, I get paid still. And I'm never gonna die. So the chapter kind of ends in the way of, it's like, well, you guys are gonna need a ride. The sun's coming up soon. So I'm gonna, like, call my brother Apollo down to help you.
Yeah, like, I forget what adjective she uses to describe him, but it's sort of just like my irresponsible brother or something like that.
Artemis's silver eyes gleamed. Yes, boy, you see, Bianca D'Angelo is not the only one with an annoying brother. It's time for you to meet my irresponsible twin, Apollo.
Irresponsible.
So, B, what is the name of the next chapter?
The name of the next chapter is Talia Torches New England. So that's exciting. Does she set stuff on fire? I don't know.
So, B, what do you think's gonna happen?
Oh, maybe there's an accidental fire that'll happen. I don't know what else it could mean.
Now, how much do you know about Apollo?
Almost nothing except he's the sun god, right?
Yes.
That's about it. Okay, so there could be some stuff with the sun.
He drives a chariot that is the sun.
Okay, I can see that.
That's all I'm gonna tell you.
Okay, well, I guess sunbeams are gonna explode cute little New England homes. That's just kind of my image of what's gonna happen in this chapter, is just sort of the sun exploding and, like, cute little Cape Cod houses just setting on fire. Like, that's my mind's eye.
So we did get one email from Angela. Hey, Zack and B, I really love your podcast. I've been listening for a couple months now, and I'm obsessed. A lot of caps. I am 14, and I really love your podcast. You guys talk about books a lot. What are some books that you recommend to get introduced after finishing Percy Jackson? B, do you have any books you want to recommend?
I mean, I guess The Hunger Games, because that's definitely, like, in the same realm of, like, children fighting. Like, not monsters necessarily. I mean, I liked those books. I haven't read them in a long time. I'm just thinking, like, in terms of YA. It's really funny because I feel like I used to read a lot more YA until I started doing shows about it, and now I just mainly read what I do for the show. I don't like read a ton of fantasy YA though.
So if I'm gonna like recommend fantasy, like I'd recommend actually the first era of Mistborn, so the Mistborn trilogy. I actually recommend that. It has a really cool main character. It's pretty much like a fantasy heist book, and that's what's really cool about it. There's only 3 of them for that series, so make sure to get that one. I always recommend Ray Bradbury, so Something Wicked This Way Comes or Fahrenheit 451. Those are more like, I call like Ray Bradbury like the dreamy literature where there's a lot of prose, but it's fantastic.
That's true. A lot of like purple prose descriptions of things.
So one book that I do recommend that I just finished reading like less than like 2 hours ago was The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal, which is, oh my god, it was so fantastic. Like, pretty much what it is, it's Hidden Figures, but like space exploration. Like a meteor hits the world, and the space program is propelled like 10 years earlier, so they need all like the people that do all the calculations to like do all the calculations because they have to get off Earth. It is a fantastic book. It's Hidden Figures meets The Martian Chronicles. It's pretty good.
Wow, that's an interesting combination. Yeah, I can't really think of a lot of like things comparable to Percy Jackson. I mean, we did mention like Narnia. Again, I didn't like love all of the Narnia books. I think I've only read 3 of them because I read like the first, no, well, maybe 4. I think I read the first 3 and then I read the last one for some reason because of in my children's like class we like jumped ahead and read the last one, which is a very weird book. I don't know if I like love it like as a series as a whole. There's also just like the weird spooky like Christianity stuff that I don't necessarily subscribe to, but like as far as, you know, magical stuff happening with children, it's like very interesting to read again, I guess, especially the first book. I like it sort of has that whimsical quality to it that like whisks you away to another universe.
Surprisingly, this is going to sound really weird. I'm not sure if you want to read it or not, but I just finished this book called Girl Sleuth about the history of the writing of Nancy Drew. So I picked up a couple Nancy Drew books.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
And it was really good. Like, I'm surprised how much I actually really enjoy Nancy Drew.
You like Nancy Drew? Yeah. I mean, like, honestly, I like those kinds of procedural detective things. Like, I like Poirot. That's, like, not really, like, comparable to Percy Jackson, but it is sort of like, I mean, you did say that he was, like, a mystery writer before, so there is, like, that element.
Thank you so much for that wonderful email. Like, we could easily, like, talk about books.
Yeah, just, like, a lot of movie, or, like, a lot of book recommendations. I can't really think of, yeah, I feel like I read way more, like, realistic YA than I do, like, fantasy a lot of the times.
When in doubt, my go-to is always The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss.
That's true, which I have yet to read because I'm a bad friend.
That's the only email that we got, but I did get a package.
Oh, right. Yes.
So B sent me a package for Christmas. 1 second, I actually have to, like, there's going to be some, like, ASMR right now as I, like...
of the crinkles.
So all I did was I just opened it up, and I haven't seen what's inside it yet, but, like, I swear to God, like, when I open this up, I feel like there's going to be a single perfect, like, snowflake's going to pop out. It's going to, like, land on, like, my mic and then turn into, like, a butterfly.
I almost sent you peppermint bark in the shape of a snowflake, but I only had the regular kind left. But anyway.
So I'm going to give out my address and then B's address, and then we'll start from there, okay? So so B is from the North Pole.
North Pole, elf number 1.
Actually, that's what it says right on the box.
Yep, mm-hmm. Do you see all the Christmas packing tape that I put on there?
Jesus Christ. This is appropriate because it's Christmas time. Oh, God, it just smells like peppermint. Oh, there's like...
Well, yes, because there's peppermint in there.
There's like packing peanuts, so I eat the packing peanuts. Are they like sugar cookies?
You will die, so do not. Well, I think some of them are biodegradable, but not all of them. So it's sort of a fun, sort of a Russian roulette situation. Is it edible? Is it not?
Just hear that. That's some like star
I'm trying to remember what I gave you. So I think I sent you almond crescents, toffee bark, peppermint bark, and peppermint hot cocoa cookies. Is that everything that's in there?
I don't know the difference. All I just see is sweets. I see a letter, and then I see a box.
Then there's also, I send you a card, and then there's also a box. Do you want to open the box? You could open the card first, and then open the box.
Let me read the card first, because I'm sure there's actually like non-spoiler. There's probably some words written in this.
Mm-hmm. You could use like a butter knife or something to open it without breaking the wax seal with the snowflake on it.
Let me just use my teeth really quickly.
Don't eat the wax, Zach.
Okay, so hope, peace, cookies. Happy holidays, Zach. You are a good friend and a hilarious person. I'm glad we've gotten to be better friends this year. I hope the new year brings you many wonderful things. Let me give you your head start on your crap ton of cookies and give Rosie a pat for me. Sincerely, B. Oh, thank you, B.
No problem. Okay, I want you to open the box. Imagine it's a tiny head.
I'm waiting for it to be like the Ark of the Covenant. This card's really nice, and it's making me happy. And then there's a little box, and it's got like candy cane colors. Is this my present a box?
Yeah. All right, let's see if you can. I hope you like it. I don't know.
Okay, the box. I'm gonna slowly open the box up now for dramatic effect.
With like little like baker's twine on it. I know I like went.
You hear that? That's the sound of me opening and closing it repeatedly. Okay. Oh my god! I'm about to cry. Oh. No, like I'm actually like about like my voice is cracking.
Okay, so what are you witnessing right now?
1 second, I gotta like clear the tears out of my eyes because I just cried.
You gotta collect yourself.
I gotta collect myself. I got a little picture of Rosie, and it's hand painted, and it has a bow.
Yeah, it does have a bow. I'll post a picture on the. I'll send you the pictures that way you can post it to the Twitter.
This is the nicest gift I've ever gotten.
Aw, I'm glad you like it.
Thank you.
Aw, I'm so happy. You seem touched.
I am touched.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of become my thing to paint people's dogs, so I was like, I might as well paint Rosie.
And now I have a special place. It's gonna go right at my podcasting studio.
I knew it would. That's why I made it a little frame. I've made them before as like ornaments, but I know you don't really do the Christmas thing, so now you could hang it up.
Now I'm gonna like noisily eat some peppermint bark because like chocolate makes everything better.
Yeah, you could eat a piece of candy to quell your tears from the painting of Rosie.
Yeah, I think that kind of like wraps up this episode. Thank you everybody for listening. I hope you guys have a wonderful new year. And I, for one, want to welcome our new, dinosaur overlords for the new year.
Yeah, whatever's going to happen in 2019, the year that sounds like a fake year.
Yes. So I, for one, welcome our new either dinosaur robots or ape overlords.
Or dinosaur robot, ape. Combination of, apes riding mecha dinosaurs.
Hey, I can't rule anything out once the apocalypse happens. So thank you guys. Hope you guys have a happy, wonderful new year. I hope you pet all your dogs or your kittens or your lizards or your dinosaurs.
Or your hedgehogs, but gently.
Oh yeah, somebody say slap your hedgehogs.
Don't slap your hedgehogs. That'll end poorly for both of you.
So yeah, don't do what I just said, because I don't even know why I said that.
just punch your hedgehogs across the room. Just kind of drop kick them.
Oh, B, there's like sirens now. The animal control is after me.
Pete is busting down the door. All right.
I meant to say pet, not slap.
Yes, gently pat your hedgehogs.
Yes, gently pet them. And then make sure to like round them all up and then send it to us so we can have more pets in our house. Where can they find you, B?
You can find me on Twitter at bkellygorman, and you can find me on Tumblr at twinpoetry.tumblr.com.
If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Suda41, that's SUDA41. If you want to follow our show on Twitter, that's at halfblood_radio. And if you want to email our show and send us any questions, you can email us at radiocamphhalfblood@gmail.com. We also have t-shirts available at TeePublic, so just go to www.teepublic.com/RadioCampHalfBlood, and you'll find us really easily. We got some new shirt sales and some sticker sales for the New Year's, so I know who you guys are, So you gotta post your pictures because
I know you guys. Oh yeah, people bought some stuff.
people bought some stuff, some stickers and
Yeah,
shirts.
you could post on it on the Twitters and add us or like let us know. Or like Tumblr, whatever, like, post a picture of you repping your merch like my mom in her t-shirt.
Other than that, we have a Patreon/Radio Camp Half Blood. We're going to be doing a review of Ready Player One, hopefully very soon. We're going to get back to doing the monthly book club.
That actually reminds me, for Christmas, I just got from my sister's boyfriend a Book of the Month Club subscription, which is awesome. So I'm very excited about that. I guess I get to pick from like a few books that they like provide, and you can pick one and they send it to you. So that's going to be pretty cool.
I'm Zach.
I'm B.
And keep staying mortal. Bye.
Bye, guys.